Okay, Unit 8, Creative Media Industry Awareness. So here we are going to be spending around about 25 hours in terms of research, in terms of the prep time, in terms of, get rid of that, in terms of the writing or gathering of evidence and uploading to one file. Around about 25 hours is the estimate here. The aim of this unit is for you to develop, or rather build, on your understanding, because many of you have a really good understanding already of how the sector is structured. Now, this spec was written a few years back, and I feel like the fluidity and how malleable and fluent the structure of media is in 2017 isn't made clear in these questions here, but I want your answers to be up to date and relevant to the culture we live in right now. What I mean is the structure of the media industry was a little bit more precise, a little bit more blocky, a little bit more segregated back in 2010 when this spec was written. In 2017, every area is fluid and integrates with all forms of media in this brave new digital industrial revolution we find ourselves in. So some of the answers for these, we're got to take into consideration the fact that things have changed enormously. So, outcome 1, know how the creative media industry and sector is structured. So let's look at 1.1. Describe the industries within the creative media sector. So I want you to do more than just this. I want you to, of course, tell me about graphic design, journalism, film, TV, photography, animation, music, radio, podcasting, online, and so on, and social media, of course. But more than that, I want you to tell me about the actual sector in terms of its influence on culture, in terms of how much money does it bring into the economy annually. I know it's like £8 million pounds an hour, I think it was, in 2015 from some stats I saw from Creative Skillset. What does that equate to in terms of billion per year? Find out what the creative media sector is actually worth, what these industries within the sector, what they are, describe them, and then tell me how much it's worth to our economy. 1.2, describe cross-industry ownership. And this is what I was alluding to at the top of this screencast, really. Cross-industry ownership is increasingly the norm in the sense that no one company does just one thing anymore. So the BBC, of course, started off with radio and then TV and then journalism and then online and so on and so on. So it's important for a media company to be diverse and multifaceted. Sky, originally just television, was branched out to web services, online providers of content, as well as providing actual internet connections, as well as producing elements and content that's available for people online. Cross-industry ownership, find a company and then tell me about the way that that's diversified to make itself available across as many different forms of media as possible. Phrases such as synergy, convergence may be familiar to some of you, and useful search words when researching your answer for 1.2. 1.3, explain the relevant relationships between a range of industries within the creative media sector. So, with this, you need to look at a range of industries. So a range I would take to be 3 to 5 different industries. 3 is a good number to aim for as a minimum, to explain the relevant relationships between different industries within the sector. So for example, you may look at a film that's coming out potentially, and how the designers or the advertisers or the marketers or the social media campaign team works with the distributors, with the film producers to come together. So that's about 4 or 5 different industries there coming together to create and produce work for one particular product. Explain the relevant relationships between different industries. So find one product is how I would do this, and tell me about different relationships between different companies, different industries. So that might be, for example, if it's a film, who's doing the advertising for it? who's doing any TV work for it, for example, who's doing the print media advertisements for it, in terms of social media as well. You may look at the way that one particular product diversifies across different forms of media, across different industries within the creative media sector. Relevant relationships, so talk about how they combine and come together to advertise the film coming out on the big screen. In terms of outcome 2, understanding a specific creative media project's life cycle, I want you to describe the stages of a specific creative media project's life cycle. So for this, you may want to look at, for example, the traditional pre-production, production and post-production life cycle of a film or TV show, or you may want to keep it more specific to something that you do in your role, in the sense of what are the stages you go through. Do you go through mind mapping? Do you go through ideas generation? Do you go through creative ways of trying to tap into different innovative approaches to a project's idea starting point? Then do you go into storyboarding, script writing? Do you go into meetings? Do you meet with the client at this point? Then do you move into a production where you're actually producing the work alongside somebody? I mean, it's very much what you do. A creative media project, that could be in any particular area that is of interest to you. So if it's web design, photography, or journalism, what are the stages? Tell me. 2.2, explain and justify resources required for a specific project. So, what are the resources? SD cards, cameras, tripods, lights, rooms, people, travel, transport. What's required for a specific project? Again, be specific. Try and tie it ideally to a project you've done or one that's coming up. That might be better, actually. Outcome 3. Understand the role of a specific team within the organisation of which it is part. 3.1. Describe the vision, mission, often the same thing, and values of a specific creative media organisation. So here you might want to look at one of the big boys. So you may want to look at one of these guys in terms of what their mission statement is, in terms of their values and what they are trying to do within their organisation. When you get to bigger companies such as these, you start to get words such as vision, mission and values. 3.2. Describe how a specific creative media organisation is funded, governed and regulated. So for this, if you were to look at these guys, for example, you could use the example of the licence fee in terms of the way it's funded, in terms of the way it's governed, who is responsible for it, who actually makes sure it's abiding by the rules and regulations. Is it people like Ofcom, for example? Is it people like the ASA, the Advertising Standards Authority? How is it regulated to make sure it is following what the governance is saying it should be following? Describe how a specific organisation is funded, governed and regulated. So, let's look at 3.3 then. So 3.3, explain the role of a specific team within the organisation. So following on from 3.2, you need to focus on one of the teams, whether it be the graphics team, whether it be the journalism team, the social media team, whether it be the photography aspect of it, the radio, the podcasting, whoever it might be. What's their role? What do they do? What are they for? What's their purpose? What's their reason? What do they do? And what impact does it have? 3.4, explain the relationship between a specific team that you mentioned in 3.3 and the others within the organisation. So how do these guys help these guys? What is the link between them? Do they work alongside each other? Do they work in isolation? Do they work as part of like a team that if these guys here don't do their job, then it affects everybody else? Or these guys work in isolation completely? Or is it part of like a factory style, well-oiled machine whereby they're fundamentally ingrained and part of the same sort of living, breathing organism, as it were? Find out. 4 now. Understand individual team roles and responsibilities within a specific project life cycle. So, let's have a look. 4.1. Explain individual roles within a team. So, individual roles. So within a team, you may want to tie it back to this specific team you looked at here. What are the individual roles within the team in terms of project manager, in terms of assistants, in terms of apprentices, in terms of facilitators, whatever the job titles are within that team? What are their roles? What do they do? Explain, give examples of what they do, what they're responsible for. For 4.2, explain their responsibilities and outputs. You would have started to have answered this already in 4.1. 4.2 and 4.1 can be combined together, I think, for this. You may want to even go further into combining it with this one here as well, 4.3. Makes sense. You'll find this quite a lot with the BTEC units, NVQ units rather, whereby they interlink quite neatly. If you find yourself explaining in 4.1 here what it's asking you to do in 4.2 and 4.3, there's no reason why you can't write when you're putting together your answer that this hits 4.1, 4.2 and 4.3. As long as when I'm assessing it I can look at it and go, right, that's where Hayley's put her answer for these here. So I can see at a glance that it all ties together. Individual roles within the specific team, responsibilities and outputs. So in terms of the impacts of what they do, the outputs, what is it they're actually doing within the life cycle, how does it affect things, and describing examples of how they're interdependent, a symbiotic relationship that we often have in creative media jobs, whereby what one person does affects either directly or indirectly or tangentially other team members. How does it all connect? Right, bit messy that one, but you get the idea. Any issues, please let me know. Contact me online on Google Hangouts preferably, but if you're trendy like me and you're on Twitter, then you can also give me a little tweet. Alright, bye bye.